At Sunday lunch, I asked casually, "Did you pick up my prescription?" The doctor said it's urgent. My dad looked up from his plate, almost surprised I was still talking about it. "Oh, we used that money to buy your brother's new phone. He needed it for school." I froze. The words barely registered at first, like my brain couldn't process them. I just stared at him. I waited for him to say something else. Something that would explain why they'd chosen a new phone for my brother over the prescription that the doctor said was critical. But nothing else came. His attention shifted back to his food. I turned to my mom, hoping for some kind of explanation or even an apology, but she just looked at me blankly, her fork hovering above her plate. My pulse started to race. I had to say something. It was too ridiculous to let slide. "Right," I said, my voice tight. "Then I guess you didn't read the warning label the pharmacist sent." My mom's eyes widened, and she whispered, "Warning." She looked at my dad, who had gone pale. I leaned forward, lowering my voice so they had no choice but to hear me. "The doctor said it's urgent, that it's for my health. That prescription isn't just something I can get to when it's convenient. It's serious." I could feel the heat rising in my chest, spreading up my neck. "And you chose a phone over that?" The silence at the table felt thick, suffocating, as my words hung in the air. My dad finally met my eyes, but his face was white, drained of all color. I stared at him, waiting for something, anything, to make sense of this. But nothing came. I sat back in my chair, my appetite completely gone. The sounds of the dinner table faded into the background. This wasn't just about a prescription. It was something bigger, something deeper. It had taken me years to learn to rely on myself. Now, it seemed, even that was being stripped away. I went to the campus health clinic the next afternoon, mostly because Marcus threatened to call my parents if I didn't. He had been the one to catch me that morning. When I nearly collapsed in the chemistry lab, he kept asking if I needed an ambulance, and I kept insisting I was fine, just tired. But even I knew I wasn't fine. This wasn't the first time it had happened. I just managed to hide it better in the past. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and stale magazines. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I filled out the intake form. My hands shaking just enough that the pen felt unsteady in my grip. I checked no for most of the questions. Even though I probably should have checked yes for more of them. My blood pressure was higher than normal, my hands numb for most of the morning. But I didn't want to admit any of it. I didn't want to seem like I was overreacting. When I finally got called back, the doctor was a young man, maybe in his early 30s. His kind eyes felt like they could see straight through me. He had that calm, reassuring way about him, the type of doctor you could trust. That's how I thought it would go. At least, until he frowned at my vitals. His frown deepened as he asked me to follow his finger with my eyes, squeeze his hands, push against his palms. "How long have you been having neurological symptoms?" he asked, his pen hovering over his notepad. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the question before I finally answered, "I don't know. A few months, maybe longer." "Define the symptoms for me," he said. I tried to think of how to explain it. The dizzy spells that came out of nowhere, the numbness in my hands like I'd been sitting on them too long but hadn't. The headaches that felt like something was squeezing my skull from the inside, the ringing in my ears that came and went for hours. I told him all of it, and I watched his face as I spoke. His concern didn't fade. He didn't write anything down. Instead, he just stared at me, his face tight. "Why didn't you come in sooner?" I had to swallow before answering. I couldn't look him in the eyes. Because my parents would have told me I was being dramatic. I didn't say it out loud, but I had learned long ago that in my family, I was always the one who had to push my problems aside for everyone else. The doctor didn't respond right away. He just ran more tests, checking my reflexes, coordination, and eye movements. I couldn't tell if it was just routine or if something was really wrong. His frown just kept deepening, though. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me as he printed something out and handed it to me in an envelope. "You need to take these medications immediately," he said, his voice firm. "Not suggested. Need, and you need to see a neurologist within the week. Not next month, within the week." My stomach twisted into a knot, and I could feel the weight of that envelope in my hands, heavier than paper should be. "Is it serious?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slowly. "Serious enough that you shouldn't wait." He held my gaze. "I mean that, Lena. Don't put this off." I took the envelope with numb fingers. It felt like a bad dream, something I couldn't wake up from. That night, I called home. I sat on my bed, legs crossed, the envelope on my nightstand like some kind of ominous warning. My mom answered the phone on the third ring, her voice distracted, like she was busy doing something else. "Lena, sweetie, how are classes going?" she asked brightly. It was as if nothing had changed. "Mom, I need to tell you something." My voice came out shakier than I wanted. I didn't want to be this vulnerable, but I needed her to hear me. I went to the health clinic today. The doctor ran some tests, and he's really concerned. He gave me a prescription I need filled right away. Is it just stress? My mom's voice was suddenly too calm, too dismissive, like she didn't want to deal with this right now. You've always been such a worrier. I closed my eyes, my chest tightening. No, Mom. It's not stress. He said I have neurological symptoms, and I need medication immediately. I need to see a specialist within the week. There was a long pause, and I could hear the TV in the background, some reality show my dad was always watching. Well, we'll pick up the prescription tomorrow. My mom finally said, her voice softening. Don't worry about it. Just focus on your studies, okay? Relief flooded through me. Really? I asked, surprised. Yeah, we've got it handled. You just concentrate on school. My dad's voice came through muffled, like he had leaned over my mom's shoulder. Don't stress yourself out. We'll take care of everything. Thank you, I whispered, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. When I hung up, I felt lighter. For a moment, I believed them. They were going to handle it. Everything was going to be okay, but I had a sinking feeling in my stomach that told me it wouldn't be. Not this time. I went home that weekend, partly because I wanted to make sure they'd picked up the medication and partly because I just needed to see my family. I hadn't been home for a few weeks, and the house looked the same as always. The maple tree in the front yard had dropped leaves everywhere. The porch light flickered because Dad never bothered to fix it, and there was Dad's truck in the driveway, just like it always was. Inside, Ava was sprawled on the living room couch, completely absorbed in her new iPhone. Not just any iPhone, the latest model. The one that cost more than my textbooks for the entire semester. Nice phone, I said, dropping my bag by the stairs. I tried to keep my voice even, but I could already feel the frustration bubbling up in my chest. Ava glanced up from the screen, her face lighting up. Right, Mom and Dad surprised me with it yesterday. It has this amazing camera, and I can edit my videos right on the phone. It's perfect for my school project. I barely heard her. My mind was already spinning. I walked into the kitchen, hoping that maybe I had missed seeing the prescription there. Maybe they had picked it up after all. But when I opened the cupboard, the only thing I saw was Ava's phone box and some accessories she'd ordered. Nothing about medication. Mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish rag. You're early, she said, glancing at the clock. I wasn't expecting you until dinner. Yeah, I said quietly. I wanted to check on the prescription. I didn't even have to finish the sentence. Mom's face tightened, her eyes flicking toward Ava. Dad appeared from the hallway, grinning like he hadn't a care in the world. There's our college girl, he said, clapping his hands together. How's the chemistry major treating you? We all sat down in the living room, and for the next hour, I listened to Ava excitedly talk about her upcoming school project. Something about a multimedia presentation that required professional, great equipment, which she said justified the new phone. My parents hung on her every word, asking questions, offering suggestions, beaming with pride. I waited for a lull in the conversation. A chance to bring up the one thing that had been gnawing at me. Hey, so about my medication. I started, trying to keep my voice casual, though it felt anything but. Mom waved a hand like she was brushing off an inconvenience. Oh, not now. Your sister is telling us about her project. I tried again. Did you pick up my prescription? Mom barely looked at me as she passed the salad bowl. Your sister needs us more right now. She's got that big presentation next month. I froze. I tried to swallow the anger building in my throat, but it caught like a lump. But the doctor said it was urgent. It's for my health. Dad's eyes flickered to me for a second, but then he turned back to Ava. The phone was important, he said, his tone dismissive. She needs it for her school project. Her grade depends on it. I felt the weight of his words like a punch in the gut. 1,000 little things clicked into place in my mind. This wasn't just about a prescription. This was about everything. How I'd spent my whole life watching Ava get whatever she wanted while I had to settle for whatever was left. Right, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, but it cracked. Then I guess you didn't read the warning label the pharmacist sent. Mom's fork froze mid-air. Warning, she whispered, her voice cracking slightly. She glanced at Dad, but his face had gone pale, like he hadn't expected the conversation to turn this way. I stared at them, my pulse pounding in my ears. The doctor said it's serious. He said it's urgent. You know, the kind of thing that isn't just about a phone or a project. Dad shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. It's fine. You're just stressed. You always overreact about your health. The words felt like they landed with a thud. I wanted to argue, to scream, but I couldn't. I just looked at him, unable to process what he was saying. Really? I asked, my voice flat. Is that why I can barely feel my hands some days? Or why my vision goes blurry and I can't catch my breath? But sure, a phone's way more important. The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel the anger building, my frustration spilling over. They were so busy making excuses, making it all about Ava and her perfect little world, that they couldn't even hear me. Couldn't hear how badly I needed them to care. To take me seriously. Ava's voice cut through the silence, that smug tone I knew all too well. It's not like you're dying or anything. I blinked, the words hitting me like a slap. For a second, everything went still. The anger, the pain, the weight of years of neglect. It all hit me at once. I put my fork down slowly, my appetite gone. The room suddenly felt small, suffocating. My hands trembled slightly, and I wasn't sure if it was from the numbness I'd been dealing with or something deeper. The truth. I had spent so much of my life hiding my own pain, thinking it would go away if I just kept my head down. But now, sitting here, it was impossible to ignore. You know? I said. Voice thick with something I couldn't name. You both could have at least tried to make me feel like I mattered. I didn't even look at them as I said it. I couldn't. Mom's eyes were wide with shock, but Dad was still avoiding my gaze, his face flushed with discomfort. Ava, on the other hand, just stared at her phone, like she didn't have a care in the world. I stood up slowly. Forget it, I muttered. I'll deal with it myself. I grabbed my bag and walked out of the room. My chest ached, and I couldn't breathe. I had no idea what to do next, but I knew I wasn't gonna let them keep ignoring me. Not anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father's words still echoed in my mind as I drove away, the tension between us hanging thick in the air. How had things gotten this bad? For years, I had been told my health issues were just stress, just a phase. And now, I was faced with the gut-wrenching reality that my family had been making decisions about my life without my knowledge, without my consent. They had known all along and chose Ava's future over mine. I couldn't understand it. I wasn't angry, at least, not in the way I thought I'd be. This wasn't the rage that comes from being cheated on or lied to. No, this was a different kind of fury. The kind that comes when you realize your entire existence has been filtered through someone else's lens. When you find out that your life, your health, your struggles, meant less than the image they were trying to protect. I could feel the weight of it pressing against my chest, making it harder to breathe. When I got back to my apartment, I sat in my car for a while, staring blankly at the empty space around me. The parking lot was quiet, save for the hum of a distant car engine, and the occasional bark of a dog from a nearby building. It felt like I was miles away from everything, even though I was just a few steps from my door. Inside, I found a message from Marcus, asking how things were going. I stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether I should respond. But what was I supposed to say? How do you explain to someone that your family has been lying to you your whole life? That they've been playing games with your health, while telling you everything was fine? I put the phone down, pacing around the small space I called home. The walls felt too close, and I needed air. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, making my way to the nearby park. The fresh air hit me like a slap to the face. I needed something to ground me. Something to remind me I wasn't as lost as I felt. I walked around the empty paths, the evening sun casting long shadows on the ground. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful, and for a moment, I let myself breathe without the constant weight of what I had just discovered. But as much as I tried to escape the thoughts racing through my mind, they came back again and again. Why had they done this? And why had they done it to me? I couldn't shake the image of my father's face when I confronted him. He had been so sure of himself, so confident in his decision. And then I remembered the way my mother looked when I mentioned the warning label. Her eyes had widened, her mouth going dry as if she hadn't even considered the gravity of what they had done. That was when I realized the truth. This wasn't just about the medication. It wasn't even just about my health. It was about control. It was about their image, their convenience, their comfort, and I had been nothing more than collateral damage in their pursuit of it. I stopped walking for a moment, staring at the ground. I couldn't keep letting them treat me like this. I had spent too long being the one who tried to hold it all together, too long sacrificing my own needs for theirs. It was time for that to end. I had to take control of my life, my health, and my future. Even if it meant stepping away from the very people who were supposed to love me. The sound of my phone buzzing in my pocket pulled me back to reality. I pulled it out, half expecting another text from Marcus. But it was from my mom. Lena, we need to talk. This isn't what you think. I could almost hear the desperation in her words. And for a split second, I thought about calling her. I thought about asking her to explain, to make it all better. But I knew deep down that I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it was so clearly not. I didn't respond. Instead, I pocketed my phone and kept walking. The cool evening air felt like a reminder that I was alone now, but in a way, it was freeing. I didn't need them to fix me. I needed to fix myself. By the time I returned to my apartment, the weight in my chest had lightened. Just slightly. But I knew this was only the beginning. There were still so many questions I needed answered, and so many decisions to make. But one thing was clear: I wasn't going to let this family's betrayal define me. It was time to take control. I sat down at my desk, staring at the pile of unopened bills and papers that had gathered there. The prescription I needed to fill was still sitting on the edge, untouched. I reached for it and placed it in front of me, the small piece of paper feeling heavier than it should. This was the first step. The first thing I had to do for myself. And from here, I wasn't looking back. I dialed the pharmacy number, my fingers trembling slightly as I spoke. It was time to stop waiting for someone else to take care of me. The confrontation that had been building in me for weeks finally came to a head that afternoon. I couldn't keep pretending like everything was fine. I couldn't keep putting my feelings aside, while my parents acted like nothing was wrong. The weight of the secret they had kept from me, the way they had dismissed my health, everything felt like it was about to break open. I stood outside the front door, hesitating for a moment. My hand rested on the doorknob, but something inside me wanted to run, but I couldn't. I had to face them. I had to finally speak my truth. I took a deep breath, pushed the door open, and stepped inside. The familiar smell of home hit me first, the scent of cooking filling the air. Ava was sitting at the kitchen table, fiddling with her phone. My parents were in the living room, half watching the TV. Everything looked the same. But nothing was the same anymore. I walked past the living room, not looking at them, but I could feel their eyes on me. My father's voice broke the silence. "You're early. What's going on?" I stopped, turned, and faced them. "We need to talk." My voice was calm, but underneath I could feel my heart pounding. My mother looked up, her eyes immediately full of concern. "What is it, sweetie? Are you feeling okay?" I swallowed hard, keeping my emotions in check. "No, I'm not okay. I haven't been okay for a long time." They exchanged a look, and I could see it, something defensive in their eyes. They knew this was coming, but they didn't want to deal with it. "Mom, Dad," I said, my voice shaking but steady. "I know about the phone. I know about what you did with the money. But more importantly, I know what you've been hiding from me for years." The room went still. The air seemed to grow thicker, pressing down on us. Ava stopped scrolling on her phone, looking at me with wide eyes. "You didn't just ignore my health," I continued, my voice getting stronger. "You lied to me. You let me suffer while you kept choosing Ava's future over mine." My father's face went red. "That's not fair, Lena. You're exaggerating. We did what we thought was best." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me, but I fought to keep it in check. I wasn't here to fight. I was here to get answers. What part of this was best? You knew my condition was serious, but you chose to ignore it. You gambled with my health so you could protect Ava's career, and your image. My mother stood up, shaking her head. "Lena, don't say that. We didn't know it was that bad. We thought it would go away. The doctors were being dramatic." I let out a bitter laugh. "You thought it would go away. That's why you didn't fill the prescription. You let me get sicker, and you didn't even care enough to help me. How do you explain that?" My father stood, fists clenched at his sides. "Enough, Lena. You're making this worse than it is. It's just a misunderstanding, a mistake." I couldn't stay quiet anymore. "A mistake? You've been lying to me for years, and now you want to brush it off as a mistake." Ava, who had been silent up until this point, finally spoke up. "Lena, it's not like that. You don't understand." "No." I interrupted. "You don't understand. I've been living with this for years, pretending everything was fine while you all kept pretending I didn't matter as much." The tears welled up in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "I know about the gambling," I said, my voice cracking. "I know you put your debt before my health." I could see my father's face go pale. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice dropping. "I know," I said, stepping forward. "You gambled away the money for my treatment. And now, years later, I'm left with the consequences. Do you think I haven't noticed? Do you think I'm that stupid?" My mother stepped forward, reaching for me. "Lena, please. It wasn't like that. We tried. Your father was trying to fix everything. We were trying to do what was best for everyone." I pulled away from her touch. "You were trying to save face. You were too ashamed to admit you made a mistake, and I paid the price." The silence in the room was deafening. No one spoke for a long time. I could feel the weight of it all, years of neglect, years of lies, all laid out in front of me. My chest tightened, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. "This is the part where you apologize, right?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You tell me you're sorry, and we pretend everything is fine." But I wasn't interested in their apologies anymore. I didn't want to hear their excuses. I had spent too many years making excuses for them. "I can't do this anymore," I said quietly. "I can't keep pretending that I'm not worth the effort. That my health, my life, doesn't matter. I deserve more than this." I turned to leave, but my father's voice stopped me. "Lena, where are you going?" I didn't look back. I'm done. I could hear them calling my name behind me, but I didn't stop. The door slammed behind me, and I walked out of that house for the last time. I didn't know what was next, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally taking control of my life. The road ahead was uncertain, but I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their web of lies and neglect. It was time to choose myself. I didn't go back to my apartment right away. Instead, I drove aimlessly, letting the miles slip away under my tires as I tried to sort through everything that had just happened. I wasn't even sure where I was going, but I needed to be somewhere far from my family. Somewhere that didn't carry the weight of their lies and expectations. The hours passed in a blur, the city streets flashing by, but I was stuck in my own head. The words from the confrontation replayed over and over in my mind. You gambled away my treatment money. My father's face when I said that. My mother's quiet, broken apology that felt like an afterthought. I could still see the look on their faces as I walked out. They didn't even try to stop me. They didn't care enough to ask me to stay. That was the hardest part. The realization that they didn't care as much as I had hoped. It wasn't just the betrayal of my health or the phone money. It was everything. The years of silence, the years of me being invisible, having to prove my worth every step of the way. I had always been the responsible one. The one who took care of everyone, held everything together. But I was tired. So tired of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I didn't go home that night. I drove until I couldn't anymore, until the only thing left was the quiet hum of the road beneath me. The next morning, I called the neurologist's office. The words I had been avoiding for so long, I need help, finally left my mouth. The receptionist was kind, too kind, offering me a cancellation slot for later that day. I didn't even hesitate. I said yes. By the time I arrived at the office, I was already exhausted, emotionally and physically. The office smelled like antiseptic and lavender, a stark contrast to the storm swirling inside me. I took a seat in the waiting area. The soft murmur of people's voices, blending with the ticking of the clock on the wall. The nurse called my name, and I followed her down the hallway, the sterile white walls closing in on me. I had been to so many doctors over the years, so many tests, so many moments where I had hoped for answers. This time though, I wasn't just hoping for answers. I was demanding them. She led me into a small exam room, and I sat on the paper-covered table, staring at my reflection in the wall mirror. I looked fine, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. But I knew better now. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't lie to myself. When Dr. Chun walked in, she didn't waste any time. She had a calm, measured demeanor, the kind that instantly put you at ease, but there was something in her eyes. Something I couldn't quite place. She didn't look at me like I was just another patient. She looked at me like I was someone she had to help. After reviewing my file and asking a few routine questions, she pulled up an image of my brain scans on the computer. These are from 5 years ago, she said, pointing to one of the images. And these are from last week. I stared at the scans, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The difference was clear even to my untrained eyes. In the newer scan, there were dark spots, areas of inflammation that hadn't been there before. My stomach dropped as she clicked through more images, the weight of it all starting to settle in. This is progressive neurological inflammation, she said gently, her voice steady. It's been developing over the past few years. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't process it. What does that mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. If left untreated, it could lead to permanent damage, she replied, her gaze not leaving the screen. Motor function impairment, sensory issues, even seizures. The room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in on me. So, it's too late? I asked, my voice trembling now. Is it too late to fix it? Dr. Chun looked at me then, her eyes soft but firm. No, it's not too late. But we need to act quickly. If we start treatment now, we can slow the progression. I nodded, trying to absorb her words. But all I could think about was how long this had been going on. How my family had ignored it for so long. She handed me a prescription, and I felt its weight in my hand. This time, I wasn't relying on anyone else to get it for me. This time, I was taking control. As I left the office, the world seemed to move in slow motion. The street was quiet, the sky a soft gray, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much. It wasn't everything, but it was something. I drove straight to the pharmacy, not bothering to check my phone when it buzzed. I didn't care who was calling or texting anymore. This was about me. This was my life. My health. The pharmacist took the prescription and nodded as he began filling it. I sat in the waiting area, staring at the fluorescent lights overhead, trying to steady my breathing. When he called my name and handed me the medication, I didn't hesitate. I took the bottle and filled it with water, swallowing the first dose right there in the pharmacy. It felt like a promise to myself, a promise that I was done waiting, done letting others dictate my life. I was choosing myself now, and nothing was going to stop me. I left the pharmacy with the bottle of pills in my hand, the weight of it still settling in. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. The path ahead was unclear, but I wasn't gonna let my past dictate my future. It was time to move forward. For me. The call from my father came the next morning, just as I was finishing my breakfast. The sound of his voice on the other end was enough to make my stomach drop, even though I had expected it. "Lena," he began, his voice low, "I need you to stop all this. This isn't how we handle family matters." I set my coffee down, the mug warm in my hands, but I felt colder than I had in days. "What do you want, Dad?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but there was a tremor beneath it. Something I couldn't fully suppress. "You need to come home. We need to talk about all of this. But not like this, not through calls and messages. You're making it worse." I could hear the desperation in his voice, the urgency he was trying to mask. But I wasn't going to fall for it this time. I wasn't the little girl who sat quietly, while he made decisions for me anymore. "No," I said flatly. "I don't think I'm gonna come home." His silence was immediate, the kind of silence that made my skin crawl. "Lena, don't do this," he finally said. "You don't understand." "No," I cut him off, standing up and pacing around the kitchen. "I understand perfectly. You've lied to me for years. You've made decisions about my health, my life, without even asking me. And now, you want to sit down and talk. What's left to talk about?" He let out a sharp breath. "You're being dramatic. This is just family business, and we don't need to air it out like this. Let's handle it quietly, like we always do." I felt a tight knot of frustration in my chest. "Handle it quietly." I repeated, my voice rising now. "You've been hiding things from me for years. You've been lying. You've been putting Ava's future before mine, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me the truth. You don't understand." He began again, but I was done with the excuses. "No, I'm done with this," I said firmly. "I'm done trying to make excuses for you. You gambled away my treatment money. You changed my medical records. You let me get sicker, and you told me it was nothing. I'm done being your scapegoat, Dad. I'm done." He didn't respond for a long time, and for a moment, I thought he had hung up, but then I heard his voice again, quieter this time. "Lena, you need to forgive us. We were doing what we thought was best. You'll see that when we explain." "Explain?" I interrupted, the anger boiling up in me again. "Explain how you chose your image and Ava's school over my health. Over me. I can't just forget that." "I'm not asking you to forget," he said, but there was no real conviction in his voice. "I'm asking you to understand." "Understand?" I laughed bitterly. "I don't need to understand. I need to heal, and I can't do that while I'm still tangled in all of your lies." He sighed heavily. "Then you'll regret this, Lena. You'll regret walking away from us. You'll see. This is a mistake." I wanted to respond, to tell him that I had already made my choice, but instead, I stayed silent. The truth was, it was hard to leave everything behind. Harder than I wanted to admit. But there was no going back now. "Goodbye, Dad," I said softly. I didn't wait for him to reply before I hung up. My hand shook as I held the phone, and for a second, I just stood there, staring at it. A part of me expected him to call back, to apologize, to tell me everything would be fine. But I knew that was never going to happen. Not now. Not after everything that had been revealed. I set the phone down on the counter and walked out of the kitchen. My apartment felt smaller now, suffocating even, but I knew I had to stay. I couldn't run anymore. I had to face them, and take the next step toward healing. The next few days passed in a blur of emotions. I tried to focus on my treatment, following the doctor's orders and taking the medication like I was supposed to. But it was hard. Every time I swallowed a pill, I thought about all the years I had lost because my family had failed to protect me. The calls kept coming, my mother, my father, even Ava. Each message left me feeling more drained, more conflicted. I wasn't ready to talk to them, not yet. They didn't deserve my forgiveness, not yet. I needed time. I needed space to breathe without their expectations hanging over me. Then, one evening, as I was lying on the couch, my phone buzzed again. It was a message from Marcus. He'd been checking in, asking how I was doing. I stared at the message for a long moment, then slowly typed back, "I'm making it." Slowly. It wasn't much, but it was something. I couldn't talk to Marcus about what was really going on yet, but his steady support, his concern for me, was something I hadn't realized I needed until now. I had always kept my emotions locked away, afraid of letting anyone see how much I was hurting. But now, with Marcus, I didn't feel so alone. Maybe I could trust him. Maybe I could finally let someone in. The next day, I decided to take another step forward. I needed to find out the full extent of what had been happening with my medical records. And I knew I couldn't do it alone. I picked up the phone and called Aunt Linda. She was the only one who had ever shown me real care. When she answered, I didn't waste time. "Aunt Linda, I need your help," I said. My voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I need to know everything about my medical history. I need to know what my parents have been hiding from me. There was a pause on the other end. Then, her voice came, quiet but firm. I've been waiting for you to ask me, Lena. I'll help you. But you're not gonna like what you find. I know. I whispered. But I have to know. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't hiding anymore. This was the beginning of something new. A new chapter. One where I was the one in control. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The next morning, the weight of the decision to leave my parents behind still sat heavy in my chest, but there was a new sense of clarity that accompanied it. I had made the right choice. No matter how difficult it was, I wasn't going back. The phone buzzed again as I sat in my new apartment. It had been a week since I walked out of my parents' house, and the silence between us felt like an endless void. This time, it was a message from my mother, her words terse and pleading. Lena, please come home. We can fix this. We're your parents. We love you. I read it twice before putting the phone down. The sadness in her message stung, but it didn't change anything. There were no easy answers for what had happened. I couldn't just return to the life I had left behind. Back to the lies. Back to the way they'd treated me. I had tried for so long to be the good daughter. The one who understood. The one who made excuses for them. But when did it stop being enough? When did I stop being the person I had to take care of, to protect? The choice was still mine, and I had already chosen. I wasn't going back. I sat down at my desk and stared at the empty notebook in front of me. For so long, I had filled the pages with my fears, my doubts, the things I thought were wrong with me. But now, it felt like a new chapter was beginning. I had to write this next part, the one where I took back control. I'd had the hardest conversation of my life with my mother a few days ago. The one where I demanded the truth. The one where she finally admitted, between sobs, that everything I'd suspected was true. The family money had been tight for years. My father had kept his gambling a secret, and when it came time to make a choice between paying for my treatment, or paying for Ava's music school, my parents had chosen her future over mine. They had made me think that I was overreacting, that my health wasn't as important as their image. And they had been wrong. When I left that day, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking towards something better. Something I couldn't see clearly yet, but something I knew I deserved. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I didn't look. I knew it would be my father, angry and demanding answers. I had stopped picking up their calls. I wasn't gonna let them trip me into coming back, into pretending everything was fine. I had been through enough pretending. There were still things I didn't know, things about my medical history, things that my family had hidden from me. But I was starting to piece them together, bit by bit. I wasn't going to let the truth be buried anymore. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Ava. Please talk to Mom. She's been crying. I closed my eyes. The weight of that message hit me harder than anything my parents had said. Ava. She was just a kid when all of this started. She didn't deserve the mess we were caught in. I could feel her guilt through the screen, the way she had been caught in the middle, too scared to speak up. I had to remind myself she wasn't the enemy. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not yet. I had to do this for myself first. I had to build something strong and steady, before I could even think about rebuilding anything with them. The phone buzzed again, but this time, I let it ring out. I reached for the medication bottle on my desk and unscrewed the lid. I had been taking it every day as the doctor had ordered. It didn't erase the damage, but it was a start. It was something I could control. I was doing this for me. Later that day, I went to the neurologist for my follow-up. I was a little nervous, but I was determined to face whatever came next. The doctor reviewed my scans from the previous week, and to my surprise, there was improvement. The inflammation had decreased slightly, and there was a glimmer of hope that the treatment was working. It was a small victory, but it was one that meant more than I could put into words. As I left the doctor's office, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. I wasn't healed yet. I still had a long way to go. But for the first time in a long time, I could see a future where I was in control of my life. Where I didn't have to rely on the people who had failed me. I sat in my car for a moment, my hands gripping the steering wheel as I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the betrayal, the anger, but also the healing, the acceptance. I had chosen myself, and that felt like the most empowering thing I had ever done. The road ahead was uncertain. There would be more hard conversations, more painful moments. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't going to let anyone take this new life from me. Not my parents, not anyone. I turned the key in the ignition and drove away. The horizon ahead of me wide open. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not the kind that comes from pretending everything is okay, but the kind that comes from knowing that I was finally living for myself. And that, I realized, was enough.